Welcome to The People I Play With. This is the show where I interview, well, the people I play with. I'm your host, Jesse Bernico. Today's guest is James Ritter. James and I have been friends for a number of years. We've played a diverse range of games together, everything from multi-session campaigns to one-shots at the local convention. How are you doing today, James?
Doing okay. It's a little rainy, and the water's finding its way into my house in various places, so I'm not enjoying that.
I know we don't often get storms here. So I want to talk about the Blade Runner game we recently played, but before we get into the specifics of that game, I want to talk about you as a player in general. Why don't you tell me, what do you think your strong suit as a player is? And, what does James bring to the table?
Oh, God. If I have a strong suit, I guess I try to make decisions that change the game. I try not to go for the conservative sort of safe play, right? I commit to the character, and I guess I'm willing to cause myself damage, in pursuing that, if I feel like that's what the character is about, right? So I don't try to play safe typically.
I think the interesting thing you said there was affect change. Like you're looking for the thing that's going to cause like something to happen as a consequence of what you do, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, I mean, look at it like a story. Like what's good about this scene, right? Whether it's two people, sharing a intimate conversation, or two people, trying to kill each other, right? It's nothing really happens. Nothing gets revealed. Nothing changes. That doesn't feel satisfying.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And not to sound too much like a job interview, but what do
God.
you think? What do you think is maybe a weakness, or that you would like to improve about your play?
I mean, I push for things, right, in game, and I'd like to probably get better at hearing, stopping and listening and seeing what other people are pushing for as well. I try to support other people, and sometimes I feel like maybe I don't do that as much as I would have liked. I come from a place of like putting myself out there, and I realize that other people don't. Some people don't.
Okay, I mean I can see that, and that sort of relates to something that I want to talk to you about a little later. But, but looking at our recent Blade Runner game, it takes most of its backdrop material from the second film actually, and in particular there are these like new Nexus 9 replicants which are supposed to be more stable and more reliable than the previous generation, so much so they even allowed them to be Blade Runners. Now, you played the unit's token Nexus 9 replicant F-15H3R, or as everyone came to call you, Fisher. Now, replicants are, of course, still very much second class citizens. So, the first thing about this game I'm interested in is your perspective on playing the token replicant in a world where you're hunting replicants. What was that like? What were you thinking? And, like, how did that inform your play?
Sure. I mean, my grounding in Blade Runner is from the first movie, right? I'm aware of the second movie, but I haven't really sat down to watch it. I think that informed a lot of what I think about how replicants are, right? But I was trying to imagine what kind of conflicts would that bring about being a replicant hunting replicants, right? How would you feel about that, and what kind of uh, internal conflicts would arise from that? So, I mean, I that's why I picked the replicant, right? The fact that you're hunting replicants and you are a replicant.
It's interesting because you said, you talked about like internal conflict. Do you think that there was any particular moment that you can think of from the game where you felt that that internal conflict was sort of exemplified?
I mean, I think there was a scene at the university where where a replicant had, I guess, false memories, and was violent and holding a hostage, right? And so I was trying to talk him down, um, and that to me felt very much like Fisher was sort of talking to himself as well. Seeing himself in this other replicant, and questioning, like, could I end up there too? Like, if somebody swapped out my memories, or that kind of thing. If somebody messed with me, could I end up being one of the people we're chasing?
I'm also curious because your character is married, and we played one downtime scene where we sort of was introduced to your wife, and I know the game sort of like fed you some prompts based on some random tables, and you ended up with this woman who wanted you to run away, which is weird because you're a replicant. So I'm curious as to your perspective on your relationship with your wife, since we only did do the one scene. Like, how did that whole like replicant relationship thing sort of work with
Right.
you?
Well, I'm part of it. The game prompted, right? So it said spouse, and you had to come up with a scene, and I drew a scene that I felt was kind of hard boiled detective, noir appropriate. I gone with like, okay, she wants you to quit the force because I'd been watching a lot of The Wire, right? And there was a lot of sort of spouses who were the detective is married to the job and the spouse comes in second, and their relationships are all breaking down because of that. And then it was a weird twist because it was like, okay, I'm a replicant, so I can't really quit. Like, I don't think I would have thought of. I don't know if I would have picked spouse had it been like my choice, right? Like, I would. That was a prompt from the game, and I'm like, I think it was a good one, but it led me to places where I'm like, okay, I don't know what this means, but let's go with it. So I was like, well, what is it? What would it? So it just sounded interesting. Like, okay, what would they do? Well, maybe they would, a replicant detective would have a replicant spouse, and that replicant spouse would have problems with the job because that's what detectives in the noir genre have.
There was very much the thought of like, wow, this woman would rather like go on the run and be a fugitive, possibly being hunted by Blade Runners, just to have not spend one more day with you, as a detective.
Yeah, which is interesting. But I don't think that was planned by, like, in the game, right, in universe. I would assume that wasn't the plan, right? The plan was, oh, we have a detective, we give him these fake memories, we got to give him a wife. We'll use this other Nexus 9 as the wife, right? And then give her some goals, but then it kind of spins off the rails where she wants to leave. And I've definitely been thinking about that, like, since that scene. I'm like, oh, what is this relationship? Who is this person, right? So, and I don't know that I have all the answers yet, but I'm interested to find out.
Yeah. So your character also took a lot of stress in the game. He broke twice, both times resulting in either physical harm to himself or someone else. Some of that stress came from exposure to things like running gun battles and the like. But a lot of it came from simply pushing to work the case harder. And for those of you who don't know, listening to this, Blade Runner has this very strict time tracking system, and beyond a certain point, characters start taking stress if they don't take some time to relax. So this kind of ties back to what you were saying about you being like a character who, player who tends to like push yourself. We played 10 of these shifts. You only took one downtime. You were kind of forced into it by the fact that you would just run out of stress in the first place. So like, given that this is a mechanic that's sitting on the table to like make choices about, like, what is it about you that pushes you to be like, what, no, one more shift, just one, it's like potato chips, right?
So I did push myself, right, to take another shift. And then the vagaries of the fiction pushed me to take another one, right? It was like I was thinking, okay, I'll rest next time. And then next time was not a time when I really could rest, right? Because the character had to be somewhere to stop something. So, the game, makes those choices hard. It was like, well, he can't not go now because his partner's going into like a violent scene. So, that there wasn't a moment now to rest. So, I mean, you could do it, but I just couldn't see it. So that's part of it. I mean, the other part is the genre. Blade Runner is a great noir where the the characters are constantly busy, right? There's a grind that's going on. They don't have a lot of time to rest, but the movie is very slow paced. And I think the game does that really well. It's just that their job just doesn't let up, right? They just barely have a time to sleep or take care of their lives in any meaningful way before the job sort of calls them back. And the shift mechanic in the game just does that really well. And so, yeah, I found my character just like, I can't. I've got this, I've got this a hold of this thing, and I've got to keep going. Um, until it was too late.
Never got the impression that you felt like the shift system was like too constraining, or had any complaints like, oh, I should be able to do A and B at the same time. um it felt like it really worked for you as a mechanic.
I like when I pick up a game, I want to see, what does this game want to be, right? I want to see the world through the system, right? So the fact that it puts limitations on me or makes me, like has to have to follow a shift system. I mean, I love that. That's actually like, without that, what are we really doing? Otherwise, you're just not going to have that same pacing. You're not going to have those same decisions, right?
Right. Well, I think my main point is that any system sort of offers up constraints, but at the end of the day you kind of have to decide, is the constraint productive or not. So I was pleased to see that, even though your character went through this grueling stress after oh, just one more shift until they couldn't take it anymore, that wasn't a frustrating experience.
No, I mean, I knew the job was dangerous when I took it, right? I mean, I knew a bit about what I was up for. I'm always happy when the game provides constraints that I have to bounce off of. You wouldn't use this shift mechanic this way in a different setting. Yeah, you'd have to tweak it.
That's true. And in particular, I feel like, you and I, we both live in Los Angeles. The game is set in Los Angeles. We both know what it's like to commute from point A to point B in Los Angeles. I feel like the shift mechanic very much supports the LA feel of, everything is 20 minutes away, regardless of how far away it is.
Yeah, you're lucky. If it's local, it's 20 minutes, right? You're spending a shift no matter what you choose, right?
Yeah.
You're going downtown, that's a shift. If you're going to interrogate a witness, that's a shift. The character's definitely being ground down.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because you also brought up the idea of interrogation. You did an interrogation scene, and one of the interesting things about the combination of the interrogation mechanic, which is functionally just one roll, and the shift mechanic, is that it kind of gets you out of you and I having to like banter for a simulated hour of doing an interrogation. You're gonna grill him for a whole shift, right? And the question is, do you break him or not, right? And we roll dice, which is interesting because some scenes were kind of short like that, where we kind of just sort of bantered and sort of set up a thing, and then rolled, and then decided like, okay, well that's what you were doing with this shift. So did you ever feel like those scenes were cut short in terms of character dialogue or potential development?
I mean, obviously, had we wanted to, we could have bantered back and forth longer, before calling for the roll. Interrogation scenes in particular are really difficult, right? But this one was really good because the way this game structures it, you have a scene, you're a detective, you're trying to get information. Based on your role, we see sort of how well that worked, right? And then you role play, but it's up to the dice whether it moves the case file forward or not.
Yeah, and I think in media, interrogation scenes are almost like little mini plays, and they're largely about like the dialogue and what the dialogue reveals about the two characters. And we are not from the improv theater school of RPG. Like, we are perfectly happy to be like, and then I interrogate him and roll dice. So
We're not thespians, and we don't typically act. So you know there's no need for us to do that. I don't need to immerse in my character and feel what it's like to pummel you. Oh, and I think we got character development in those scenes. Like,
I'm going to ask you now. I'm going to ask you the hard question.
uh-oh, uh-oh.
So when the Blade Runner RPG was announced, there was some criticism I saw on the internet, that the game was a little tone deaf, because people were pointing out that Blade Runners are kind of effectively slave catchers, which sort of links to the historical roots of policing in our own society. And the U.S. in particular has been facing all this kind of a reckoning with all the police brutality that happens here. Um, and I personally didn't feel like the game, flinches away from police violence at all. You in particular did shoot and kill a human. Uh, what are your feelings, thematically about violence, how it played in our game, how it relates to sort of the social issues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that criticism, frankly. I mean, the movie is not tone deaf. That is the target of the movie, right? That's that police violence and oppression of a sub a second class citizenry that they own. I mean, that's in the sights of the movie. That's the movie isn't oblivious, and the game isn't oblivious, right? The game is very much aware of those analogies. I think it's not deaf to them, right?
I think some of the concern was is that a lot of RPGs tend to be like, oh well, of course the PCs are the heroes, right? And might run the risk of actually sort of missing the point of its own source material, which I don't think happened here.
No, I mean there was some anti-Nexus bigotry, right? I think we knew sort of what the subtext was of the game, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not all unicorns. Right? It's not all like these Blade Runners are not necessarily good people, right? They're not perfect, heroes. They're not paladins, you know what I mean. And the people that they're dealing with are not orcs, right? It's not like we are the heroes and these are the bad guys and we kill the bad guys. Sometimes we kill people that have motivations that are understandable. I think has some focus on the stress that causes. If I had a criticism, I know that it causes stress when you're in a violent situation and when your like partner gets killed or partner gets shot or things like that cause stress. I think killing the perpetrator, right, and seeing victims should also be on that table of stress, right? I think cops generally and in genre have stress in those instances too.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. I think it kind of it sort of subsumes that in the sense that a violent situation causes stress. But you're right that perhaps a lot of the table is about when death occurs. It's because it's somebody you cared about. When perhaps it should be when death occurs at all.
Yeah, right. I mean, I could see like it being like if you're or violence, right? If your partner got shot, right? I can see that being more stressful than if you shot a Renegade Nexus 9 or a suspected murderer. Like I could see that, but I think there should be some stress for that on the table, right? I know that the GM has some latitude to say that's stressful. Um, but I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what that says about the game in terms of where it thinks stress should come from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I actually that's a very interesting point. I actually hadn't really thought about that myself. Um, I do want to focus on seeing where you did end up shooting and killing somebody. You would track somebody to this strange, damaged vending machine warehouse. You knew that they were involved somehow. They were moving mysterious equipment. You kind of tried to like bluff your way in, but it didn't quite work.
Well, I didn't know he was as high up in the food chain as I thought he was maybe a low level delivery flunky, and it turned out that he was actually
He was like the guy. So he's like, come on inside. There's, what turned out to be his sister was already waiting inside, and she pushed a vending machine on top of you. And then they were like, well, now we got to kill him because we've been exposed. And that's when you sort of open fire from underneath your vending machine. Um, but what is interesting is that the other players did attempt to contact you. You could have waited for backup. Do you feel that there was any change in sort of how you thought about Fisher's sort of, Lone Star behavior after that point?
I mean, not really, no. I mean, he is the only replicant of the three of us, and there was a little sort of replicant human tension, right? And he was on this case where he's bringing in this renegade replicant. So, so it was a personal thing, right? He didn't want to be told like wait for backup. He really didn't.
So I've asked all these questions. I've put you on the spot. Do you have anything you want to ask me about the game and how it went?
So there's a mechanic in the game where if you get a critical success, right, you get success plus there's a little what a lignap, a little something, a little extra, right? And it specifically says that the player can suggest the little something extra, and the GM, um, has the final decision or whatever. So so I did that a couple times. So I wonder, what that felt like to you. And
Here's the thing. If there's going to be something extra, I want it to be fictionally about this moment here. So probably something that wasn't particularly transparent was I was extremely sensitive to high successes on quests for information. You don't just get like the core fact, oh, there's a gang out in the river. You actually like know who he is. You've got a map of his territory, and that fictionally set you up for, oh, well, then we can just go there straight in our flying cars and land right where he holds court. So I was very sensitive to that in terms of information. It's kind of weird because there was a couple of times where that happened on some very particular ticky tack type mechanic, like your car being struck by lightning, and it's like make this roll, otherwise this bad thing happens, right? Because it's kind of like then like what's the extra good thing? I'm like we're just executing this step of the chase sequence where you avoid an obstacle, right? So yeah, I think there were certain situations where what does high success here mean when it seems like the stakes are so straightforward?
I just I'm sensitive to those mechanics because often I find it says like critical success, you get something else. But what ends up happening in the game is, we're moving quick, right? So it's like, okay, success, you get this. And I'm like, it sounds a lot like what would have happened if I got a regular success.
I mean, sometimes it's kind of like, but there isn't anything more. Like there's the thing to be found, or the thing to learn, or the thing to do. And yay, you did it.
Sometimes the answer is, yeah, it is what it is, right? I mean, but I did notice you commented, so I wanted to bring it up here.
No, fair ask, fair question.
Do you find any of the mechanics constraining or weird?
There's some odd free floating rolls that happen. The idea that you can like lose promotion points for misconduct, and then you're supposed to make a connections roll to see if you're reprimanded. The text kind of goes back and forth about how meta that is. In some places, it just seems like you did a thing, you lose a promotion point. You kind of make the connections roll to see if you're reprimanded, which sort of is kind of like, does it really make it back to chain of command? But there's a couple of other places that imply that like, oh no, you only do that if it does make it back to chain of command, and it's like, well, wait a minute, is this a meta thing?
Right. Or are you actually connecting with people?
Yeah, or are you actually calling in favors? There's some free floaty stuff that's a little free floaty like that, and I don't think that's entirely unfair. I think that's sort of like, I think a lot of games, I mean, even ones that are like really specific about how they function, like there's always some place where you end up in some gray zone that's kind of halfway between the thing that they're describing.
I think it's okay for games to say, okay, well, these are the places where you're going to need to make judgment calls,
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah. And it worked out.
So just to kind of to wrap things up a little bit, I want to ask you, do you have a favorite recent game memory?
Recent game memory. I mean, I have a lot of game memories, but not the recent ones.
Well, in that case, did you have a favorite moment from this game, since it's obviously the most recent one?
Yeah, I mean, this game, I mean, the end scene was, I think, my favorite moment because it felt like a noir detective sort of buddy cop moment. My character walks away, and the veteran, who has been, anti replicant in his commentary throughout the game, basically says, "Look, I'll take this, and let me handle it," and he kills the renegade replicant, while I step away, right? And we did the stress rolls, and my character has now, gone through a stressful chase and then gun battle through a crowded market, and then watched as this replicant was killed. So I break, right, and so now I roll on the table, and you have to attack the nearest person, and we're in the process of smoking a cigarette, so I haul off and hit him, right? So from that one strike, his fingers get broken. So he breaks, right? So now the fight is over with like one punch. So it wasn't like a beating, right? And then I'm staring off in the distance, and he's reaching in my pocket for a cigarette because he lost his other one. And that was just a great way to end the scene. I mean, it just felt like you could see that on a cop drama.
It was a pretty good moment. And we both have these extensive game libraries. Is there a game in your collection you have not yet had a chance to play that you would really love to play?
I mean, there's a ton of them. Like, you know, Gray Ranks is a game I've had forever and never actually gotten to play.
Oh, really? You've never gotten
Yeah.
to play Gray Ranks?
No, I've never played a game
Whoa.
of Gray Ranks.
Well, we should do that and talk about
Yeah,
it.
have a lot of games to play.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you for being one of the people I play with. I think this has been
Yeah,
very insightful.
I think it's been fun. It's great. I look forward to hearing you interview other people.
Thank you for listening to The People I Play With. Please join me in 2 weeks when I interview Sean Hayworth about the more human side of Blade Runner.